Hi, everyone. Welcome in to episode 6 of Two Countries, Two Americas, All Sports. Here, right before we begin Thanksgiving weekend here in the United States. My name is Nicholas Hill, live here from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I'm joined by my friend down in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Gustavo Tomazeli. Gus, how are you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. I think for people who watch us on Facebook, I have some decorations on my studio that looks better. First time I actually saw my end, and I'm ready for the show. It's interesting. Like in Brazil, only Black Friday is embraced. Thanksgiving itself, not so much. I'm having a little celebration with my family. I'm having actually roasted chicken with potato and mac and cheese and sweet potato casserole. That's gonna be my Brazilian Thanksgiving, kinda.
Oh, that sounds really good. Of course, we were talking about this yesterday about some of the differences between Brazil and America in terms of how they celebrate holidays, and that's a show we're definitely going to do as we get closer to Christmas, because of just to highlight the different cultural aspects of Christmas and other holidays between the countries.
Oh
Yeah, but
yeah, yeah. That's when we do our Christmas near Christmas one. Definitely talk about more dishes because as I was talking to you, like the Brazilian Thanksgiving is Christmas. It's very much Christmas.
oh yeah, yeah. It's just really interesting to me how different countries celebrate different things. It's like in Japan, for example, they eat KFC on Christmas. Like that, that's an insane tradition, but that's just a tradition that they have. So, when we have so for today's show, we're going to have a bit of a discussion on sports culture, various issues that have come up in both the United States and Brazil. I'm going to discuss some American topics such as Dan Mullen getting fired, LeBron getting into a scuffle with Isaiah Stewart, potential boycott of the Olympics by the United States, and then the Brazilian side, Flamengo has won their fourth game in a row. Palmeiras
Yeah.
has lost 3 consecutive games, and Botafogo, if I'm saying that right, is back in the first division. So a lot of good soccer talk down for Brazil. But let's get into some sports culture here. And there's a lot of different directions we can go with this. Gus, do you have any particular direction you want to go in first?
I think I'm gonna first go into the fan side of the culture. That's because the fan side of it. There's a lot of chants in American sports and Brazilian sports that have been kind of scrutinized. The tomahawk chop by the current MLB World Series champion, the Atlanta Braves, I think is a big example. In Brazil, right now, there's a chant that has been kind of imported from Mexico, the P chant after the goalkeeper shoots the goal kick. They always say like it was kind of embraced after Mexico played some games here in Brazil, such as the 2014 World Cup. But I think it's kind of interesting. I was even talking to my girlfriend before the show. It's like it's and they don't know how much you can go further, even punish because the Mexican example, like the more CONCACAF and FIFA try to punish, the more Mexican fans don't give a rip.
Yeah, the whole L3 situation is really intriguing. Because I wonder, exactly how do you enforce that? Because you can say, okay, we're not going to let Mexican fans that are directly dressed in Mexican garb in. But what if you dress in American garb or your rival team's garb, but then you still go in there and cheer for the opposing team? It's like there's a discussion about this after the Ole Miss Tennessee game last month, where the Vols fans threw um, trash onto the field. People are like, oh, they should ban Tennessee fans from Neyland Stadium. I'm thinking, okay, well, let's say you only want Georgia fans in Neyland Stadium. Well, what's stopping a Tennessee fan from getting some Georgia gear and going into Neyland as a Georgia fan? Like, how do you prove that someone's a fan of a particular team without just banning fans from the stands completely? I mean, that just
Yeah,
seems
that's
like
a
a really
great
stupid
point.
idea.
That's a great point. Like, because for example, and going into further into the discussion, like in Brazil, unfortunately, some fans are behaving unruly in some recent games after fans being allowed, back in the stands after, the COVID restrictions are kind of flexed. But but the thing is like when you punish the organization or like the group as a whole, you kind of let off the hook the individual who did the back act. I think Brazil has been dealing with a lot of issues like that for like decades because when, like, for example, fans fight with each other, oh, is the organized supporters of Corinthians, the organized supporters of Palmeiras, not like this individual, they did this, and that. It's like the more you put the blame on the group, the less the individual takes responsibility.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that comes to, there's a big culture of trash talk and, ribbing with your opponents and, giving them all kinds of grief throughout a game. And I think, a certain amount of that is encouraged. They want you to get loud. They want you to disrupt the other team. Um, but I guess the trouble that we're finding now in our society is exactly where do you draw the line in terms of trash talk? Obviously, you don't want to say anything personal about someone. Oh, okay. Well, let me phrase that. You don't say anything like that's outrageously personal. Like you can rib, like, for example, an opposing quarterback about their girlfriend or something like that. But you don't want to like take it to the point where it's like ribbing on like a dead relative or something. It's a
Yeah, like, or even worse, like back I think a couple of years ago, there was a big player named Fernandão that was a big player for Internacional that died in a helicopter accident. And Grêmio fans, the opposing team, some like fans of Worldly say, "Oh, Fernandão died," like making fun of the other team's idol that died. Like, that was a bit too far, and that was you know people were not happy about it, and like they kind of and even the Grêmio fans were like very like, we don't want to discant. Also, another example, when there was the airplane crash of Chapecoense, the team from Brazil, the 78, like the majority of their players, only like 3 players from the whole roster died in a plane crash. Couple of everybody was in the grieving, but a couple of months or a year later, there were fans kind of doing the airplane, kind of symbolizing airplane on the stands, making fun of this horrific, terrible accident, the terrible thing that happened to Chapecoense. So unfortunately, there will be bad people everywhere.
Oh yeah, that's definitely way too far. I mean, to me, at least for me personally, anytime death gets involved, that's where trash talk stops. At least to me, like
Yes.
I'll trash talk you on any other aspect. I'll trash talk you on like any like anything, but like when it gets to death and just stuff like that, I think there are so many other ways to come up with trash talk that you have to stop yourself from going there because then it stops being fun, and now you're just being rude for the sake of being rude, and it's just not contributing anything positively to the whole experience. Because trash talk can be a positive, can be a great positive experience even to the person receiving the trash talk, because it's kind of a shared experience. Like I think about SEC football, everyone talks so much crap to each other, but like it's all part of the experience. Like if we weren't all talking crap to each other, then it wouldn't be fun. Like that's the reason why Tennessee, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Auburn. These are games we all want to watch because we know those fan bases have so much on the line because they talk to each other every single day of the year about their teams.
No, I agree. Like, for example, when there was a big rivalry game here in Brazil between Internacional and Grêmio, those fans hate each other. They even some, like, I love there's even some like like some sentence, some terms they use that is so funny. Like Internacional, Grêmio's color is blue, so Internacional fans are like joking, like saying like, if the sky is blue, I want to go to hell because hell is known to be red, and I'm so International fan, and I don't want to be somewhere it's blue. I want to, there's some jokes they make. So International beat Grêmio, I think 3 weeks ago, and Grêmio is on the relegation zone. And then International fans and players hold up coffin signs, say Grêmio is dead because they're going to the second division. For me, this wasn't too much. I think this was, making fun of the situation that they're dying in the sports. They're dying in terms of going bad to the championship. They're dead in terms of getting the chances to survive in the tournament, in the championship. So I
Yeah,
think
I mean
that
that
was a
happens all the
good.
time in college football too. with like the idea of a dead program. Like people say Tennessee is a dead program, or like Nebraska is a dead program, or USC or Texas, or
So yeah,
insert program here.
yeah. For example, if Oklahoma fans hold cough and say Texas football is dead, I think that would be acceptable, at least
Yeah,
for
that
me.
would be accepted. Absolutely. I mean, after you lose to
It's an
Kansas,
idea.
especially.
I like, I think it can create a trend. Like if maybe Tennessee is going to be good in a couple of years, it can hold a coffin, maybe saying Alabama's dead, maybe 20 years.
Probably more likely Florida, considering some of their decision making.
Oh yeah,
We'll get to that here in a little bit. I mean, we could do it this weekend for Vanderbilt, but their program's never been alive. I mean, they were a founding member of the SEC in 1932, have never won a conference title. So that's just that. I mean, that has to be the funniest fact ever in college athletics.
But the thing is, like, you're making fun of Vandy in baseball because that's where their pride, that's where they hold their pride. You don't make fun of something the fans don't make pride. Like, it's for example, Flamengo fans are not making fun of Vasco fans because Vasco is so bad right now. They're gonna stay in the second division. Like, they don't even care right now about Vasco because Vasco is like pretty much. Flamengo fans are now rival with Palmeiras and Atlético Mineiro because those are the two teams they're constantly having to challenge in the championship. It's also a comparison. Like, is Alabama see Tennessee as a rival, or more Georgia, or even Oklahoma, or Notre Dame, or Clemson, even because of how many times they play in the big games?
Yeah, I almost feel like the only reason why Alabama fans still even care about Tennessee, if they do at all, is because of the fans. Because Tennessee fans are, I mean, we are known for being some of the most intense college football fans in existence, and that has not changed even with the team being terrible for over a decade. Because like this year is probably the best Tennessee football year. I mean, definitely, well, at least since 2016, 2015, but definitely the most enjoyable year probably since 2009. And we're still only going to be 7-5 more than likely. So I can only imagine what's gonna be like if Tennessee ever gets back to that top 10 level, just how fierce the rivalries are going to be once again. But the fans are the reason why the rivalry is so fierce, and I think that's part of it. Because like you can have a whole bunch of great games between two teams, but if you have two fan bases that don't care, like for example, if you have like let's say Washington State and Colorado, they could have 10 straight games in a row, but could you really call that a rivalry? Because I don't think those two fan bases would really care about each other's schools, But like Tennessee, Alabama, they've had 10 bad games in a row. You've had one game in the last 10 years that was a one possession game, and yet we're still Alabama fans every Tennessee week are posting the whole "I hate Tennessee. There's some low down snitches" video because they don't like Tennessee because especially they don't like the fans. And they look forward to smoking cigars in our face every single year, and hopefully one day we'll get to do the same thing.
Yeah. Speaking of, big Tennessee and big Knoxvilleian, shout out to my girlfriend, Marion Perkins, big Tennessee fan from Knoxville. She's in Germany right now listening live. And she first said, don't give a shout out. But I was like, and then she was like, no, shout out. I was like, see, we give a big shout out. She's a big supporter. She even help create our logo. So big shout out.
Yeah,
Marion Perkins.
It's going to be on early enough to where you can watch it because I guess we're normally on in the evenings, and it's overnight in Germany. So I don't know if they're 6-7 hours ahead of us right now, but yeah. But thank you for watching.
Yeah. But continue our discussion in terms of the culture of sports. Like keeping the South, one of their biggest how can I say biggest discussion recently has been the tomahawk chop because the Atlanta Braves, they are has throughout the World Series, has been criticized keeping the chant because it has been connected to a Native American symbol. I don't know, like I think because of what I heard is like the Native American community is fine, but a lot of people still think that is insensitive. Mm-hmm. I don't know where I should stand. I like the chant.
We have to the Braves did not create the chant. It was Florida State that created the chant, and it spread to Atlanta via, I believe it was Deion Sanders, right? If I'm correct, off the top of my head. It spread there and also spread to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm surprised few other Native American teams have taken that. Of course, obviously Washington no longer is the Redskins. Cleveland's no longer going to be the Indians. And I imagine it's going to be a matter of time for the Atlanta may not be the Braves for too much longer. So it was great, glad to see them get one more ring under that name. Because honestly, because I've thought about this, and personally, if they were to leave the name of the Braves, like I really wouldn't care because it's just like they're still the same team, and I would want them to change their name to the Atlanta Hammers because that would be kind of a honor of Hank Aaron. But in terms of the chant itself, my philosophy is you have to go to the community that it affects and see what their opinion is of it. And when you look at Florida State University, they have direct approval from the Seminole tribe to do it. And to me, when you look at that chant, some people think it's silly. Like I think about Bill Burr's. He has a rant on it once where he thinks it's just a bunch of silly college kids, doing the chant. But to me, though, I don't really see the tomahawk chop as mocking Native American as much as honoring. Like I mean, there are a lot of ways that people mock. Like I don't think you should do face paint, for example. Like I think that's over the line. I think simply doing the tomahawk chop is okay. Now, if it comes out that obviously Native American groups come out and change their mind and say that they shouldn't do it or that we shouldn't do it, then I think we should honor that. But until I see that, then I don't see a reason why we should, because I don't necessarily see it as dishonoring that population.
No, I agree. I agree. Definitely. I think the closest thing ever Brazil came to some sort of and I will go back even to the naming problem with the Washington and the Washington football team and the Cleveland baseball team had was when in 1940 Brazil had two Italian teams named Palestra Italia, one in Sao Paulo and one in Minas Gerais. So during the World War II, since Italy was, in the other side of the war with Brazil,
Yeah.
Brazil forced those two teams to be like, hey, you can keep active, but you're gonna have to be nationalized. Like, so they changed their name. Now they're still Palmeiras, and the other one is Cruzeiro. Today they honor the Italian roots. They honor even the Palmeiras fans call themselves Palestra Italia fans. They still remember the original name. They still remember the roots. But I think that's the closest thing any naming of the team kind of was, scrutinized. Because in Brazil, there's not like a name, like a nickname, like in America.
Yeah, well, I mean, some stuff like that happened in World War II too. For example, like anything dealing with beer was heavily demonized during World War II. Like Dachshunds, for example, were heavily demonized during the two world wars because we're fighting the Germans both times. So that type of stuff always happens during a war, which is unfortunate because you're kind of penalizing all these cultural aspects that have nothing to do with the geopolitical reasons why two states are warring with one another. But kind of tying it back to um, the Atlanta Braves. As I said, like no one in the stands, at least not anymore. I know, like back in the day, people would show up in war paint and stuff like that. And I'll say once again, I think that's a little too far. I know, like the University of Illinois they used to paint up a student who would go out and they would do this thing called the 3-in-1. And while it sounded cool, I could see why why Native Americans were offended by that and why you had to get rid of that particular situation. So it's a case by case thing. And I could see one day where they will have to stop it once and for all. And when that day happens, I'll personally accept it. I know there's going to be a lot of people who won't accept that and will create a big stink. But at the end of the day, it is just a sports chant. And, there's much more important things to fight over than just that. So as long as it's deemed okay to do so, I'm fine with it. And definitely I personally do it, just because it is one of the coolest sports chants. I mean, just when you watch the Braves player, watch Florida State player, even Kansas City, like there's few things that make a sports atmosphere as epic as that particular chant. But I just might be biased. I can understand how, if you're not a fan of one of these teams, how it may seem a little silly.
Yeah, and that's when people outside of the sports world kind of engage and they don't understand. But because sports, it's not 100% rational mentality. Like, of course, and especially when you have a chant, because a chant is like the one of the highest symbol that connected all the fans in the stadium that are rooting for one team. Like when you go to Truist Park, like when you do Toa Chang, you feel part of the game. You feel
Yeah.
part of the atmosphere. Like the same with the Chiefs fans, Arrowhead Stadium. The same here in Brazil. Like when I go and chant, like like Sunday when I was broadcast the Corinthians game, my team, when they're chanting the Vamos, Vamos Corinthians, like
Yeah.
it made me feel part of the game, even though I was working, not as a fan.
I mean, just Rocky Top. I mean, just think about the power of Rocky Top when it comes to Tennessee games. Like there are times where you watch a game, the crowd sings Rocky Top, and it seems like that mood of the whole game changes. Like it is powerful. Not every team has something like that that is able to bring them all together. Like Florida fans, they have the Chomp. These Alabama fans, I guess they have Sweet Home Alabama and Dixieland Delight. Of course, that latter one got banned for a while because they kept on saying F LSU, F Tennessee, and F Auburn. And this administration didn't like that. But our Georgia fans, for some reason, they like to bark like adult dogs, but but that brings them together. So chants are just so important, and I'm sure if the Helmut Kohl
One
shot was
one
done,
thing one thing I'll criticize American fans, the Brazilian fans kill it, is the creativity of chants during the game. Because Brazilian organized fans, they have so much chants. They have literally create music. Like, let me see if I can tell me like Palmeiras is the best. Like they say, Vamos Verdão, vamos com raça e com vontade. And then they embrace music that they know, music's like, they're popular music, but they put lyrics there, lyrics to the game. Like they
yeah,
don't. It's like you bring like a music like from ACDC or Nirvana, but you put like some Tennessee chants, some like you adapt the music, not like you put like Sweet Home Alabama. There's music's already been created, and you just put it there. Like Brazilian fans literally create a whole new lyric and just embrace the rhythm of the song.
Yeah, I think a big part of that too is obviously soccer is the sport in Brazil, and that sport never stops. So fans have to keep going the entire time. So they have to be kind of creative. While football, there's all these natural breaks that happen due to just TV and stuff like that. So I think that's a big part of why American sports fans don't really create songs. Of course, I've seen some American soccer fans. They will do stuff like I think about the Chattahooligans here that root for Chattanooga FC. They do stuff like that, but I think that's more of a product of the sport than the sports
That
culture.
that's true. That's a sports culture thing. That's one other big topic. The difference, that soccer, since it's a non-stop game, like you don't have big breaks. Even though with VAR right now, if a referee stops with VAR, it can be stopped like 5 to 10 minutes even. But normally it's a non-stopping, so you have to keep chanting. And like yesterday, it was so remarkable because and the team I covered yesterday is so funny. They, I think, is not gonna come to that, but it's the closest thing to like the Braves or the Chiefs come because their mascot is a native Brazilian. It's Indian. It's not too connected to a tribe itself, but a lot of they put paintings from the color of their team, like green and white, and they put some like symbols of the Indian because their mascot is an Indian. But there has been any criticism or anything like that until now. I mean, it's funny. Like it come now that I remember. That's I think they're the only team who has a like. I'm even gonna research. I think there are some teams who have a mascot as a native Brazilian.
Yeah, because I know. Because I'm just kind of curious, like in the aftermath of everything that happened last year, because obviously we had a massive culture movement after the death of George Floyd, the whole Black Lives Matter thing. What was the response to that in Brazil? And has that had a similar effect? Because obviously we've seen the direct result of all of that leading to Cleveland Indians changing their name, and of course we saw Washington have to change their name even before all that happening. What was the response in Brazil to all that? Because I know historically they even had more slaves than America had. Historically, a couple of centuries back, but I know the dynamics down there are way different than they are in America.
I mean, there has been addressed, like for example, players like in Corinthians game versus Santos, all the players and the referees kneeled before the game started. they knew, I believe, especially because of, there was a racism case in a Corinthians women's game literally a couple of days before that game on Sunday. So they wanted to address that as a whole unit of Corinthians. But in terms of changing anything aspect of the game, I don't believe so. I don't think there was even any backlash in terms of more, say, like one side to another. I mean, I think the biggest case of all was definitely the Mauricio Souza volleyball player case recently, which he posted on his Twitter, on his Instagram actually, a picture between the son of the new Superman character, his son kissing a boy, and he will say, "Oh my God, where this gonna lead to?" And a lot of people deemed this as a homophobic, and then he was fired from the team, but Bolsonaro embraced him, and even I think a couple of days ago he was asked to go to his rallies and to join him in some events. So I think that was probably in terms of this culture kind of backlash, more involving even politics. I think that was the biggest case, but in terms of racially, not as much as in compare Brazil compared to America.
Yeah, I feel like you see athletes kind of avoid all the stuff around avoid a lot of the LGBT situations, and obviously the whole Superman situation with Marcio Souza. It's just really interesting, and really some of the similarities between Bolsonaro and then the former President Trump here in terms of embracing certain athletes that um, perhaps are more favorable to your worldview. I think one of the big recent phenomena here in America that's sort of similar is the whole "Let's Go" branding thing. Of course, if you don't know the whole origin of that story, it was Talladega back a couple of weeks ago. This guy named Brandon Brown won his first ever race in the Xfinity Series, which is the second tier series of NASCAR, just underneath the Cup Series. He wins the race. He gets out, does a celebration on the front stretch of Talladega, and the crowd, and of course, it's been kind of a phenomenon throughout the fall as President Joe Biden's approval has gone down, and people are becoming generally upset with some of the stuff that's been going on recently. They start chanting "F Joe Biden." Well, the announcer kind of plays this off and says they're chanting "Let's go Brandon." So, and now conservatives are running with that like crazy. The whole "Let's go Brandon" thing. If you've seen that around, heard that, that's where that comes from. And and that's just really interesting too, because even at Tennessee, Georgia, a few weeks ago, I heard some people trying to start that chant. It wasn't by any means the majority of the stadium. It was probably maybe not even a percent of the people in attendance who were doing the whole F Joe Biden situation. But it's just really interesting how we've kind of let politics and sports just merge at this point, and how now
Yeah,
that's a part of sports culture, and which I think is unfortunate because sports should be an escape from our world issues and from our politics, but now it isn't now.
no, and also the situation with, let's say, the Brazilian "Let's Go Brandon" happened in the 2014 World Cup and even the 2013 Confederations Cup, where President Dilma Rousseff was having also a lot of, they have a very bad approval rating, and people would chant, "F Dilma Rousseff" straight out. There was no like kind of like the middleman, and a lot of sports journalists said, "Oh, that's
I think
just
your Wi-Fi.
some elite World Cup, prices of tickets." It's like,
I think you kind of went out there for a second. Yeah, good.
okay, no, just summarizing. Like, so back in the when Brazil hosted the Confederations Cup and the World Cup, fans were like not happy with Dilma, especially the fans that attend the games in the stadium, chanting "F Dilma," but and then kind of mixed up. But I think it wasn't as big as the Brandon situation or Biden, because I think Brazilians, I think they know how to separate politics and sports more than Americans. I think because Brazilians really take soccer as an escape. Really, they really
Right.
see soccer as like the non-factor. It
I will
was so
say, and I
funny.
think
Like,
it's getting better too here in America. I think that there was a while there where it seemed like the two were indistinguishable. Like the two were really had merged, and it was really toxic because it felt like you couldn't go on any comment section, any analysis without it devolving into a political argument. Because I'm just like, I just want to hear, I just want to talk about basketball. Like I just want to watch the NBA, right? Without having to think about other issues. But everyone wanted to bring in everything else, and it's just like, you know, we're here for the sports ultimately at the end of the day. And and obviously I'm not okay, let me really clarify this. Every player is entitled to their opinions and they have the right to speak them, and every organization has the right to put what they want on the court or whatever. But it's just disappointing to see how much just simple statements were offending people or making people just furious, because it's just like we've lost the ability to tolerate opposite opinions and understand some opinions are just really, really bad. But at the same time, you know, this sports are supposed to bring us together. And I think that if we start putting lines in the sand saying, okay, I'm not going to watch this because these people are running the thing, then, or vice versa, then it's only going to do worse damage to our society than make it better.
yeah, I agree. And also another point that I also said, like, I think in Brazil there's even not politics going to sports, but people involving with the politics of sports. Because in
Mhm.
Brazil, there's a lot of politics inside the sport. Like, teams have elections, team have president, vice president. So there's a lot of, and now more than ever, fans are really following who is the president of my team, how is the election of my team. Like, just this Saturday, Palmeiras elect the first ever woman to be their president, Leila Pereira, even though she's connected to a big bank here in Brazil that has been sponsoring Palmeiras for 6 years. And, her family has been a really, really big sponsor, giving a lot of money to Palmeiras. And she was able to co-opt that politically inside the club and elect the president for the next 3 years for Palmeiras. People wanted to know, what does she want to say? Like, what is, because in Brazil, there's a lot of the way soccer was created, the structure of the teams, even my hometown team, Rio Branco, even the small team, like this Monday, they're going to have an election, and it's to Bruno Slonik's point, which is true, that leads to a lot of corruption that we already addressed. And I think, do you think in America, players are going to get involved more with what's happening to the management of the team some point, like, or even college sports, that like the questioning of why players can't get paid. I think that's political stuff in sports, not like politics getting into sports, but players actively participating in what happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, so like, how do those elections work in Brazil? Like, do fans get to vote in them, or is it just people like that are directly in the club itself?
So let me try to explain, like, in kind of like Central American there, like Brazilian soccer clubs, the majority of it are run as like country clubs. So first you have to be a member of the country club of the team for, let's say, Rio Branco has to be 12 months. Some teams 24, other teams 48 months. Like, it depends of the regulation of the team itself. Then after you've been a membership of this club for more than 12 months, you can vote to elect a council of members of council of the team. And then you vote to the council. It's like voting. It's like electing a prime minister. Like, you vote into this council, like this, member of parliament. Then this council elects the president, the vice president, the whole management of the team. And Bruno's point, it's a mess. It's a mess because, it leads to a lot of, kind of alliances. And even, like, for example, Palmeiras, one of the largest club in Brazil, only had one candidate for president because she already had so many alliances, that are so many, connections, that there was even an opposition.
I don't imagine how insane that would be in America. I'm just trying to think, like, for example, because University of Tennessee, really the only people who have any say are the people within the administration, boosters, and that's pretty much it when it comes to selecting new coaches, who should be the new athletic director, stuff like that. If you had, like, let's say, all alumni get to vote on who the next coach or next alumni, next athletic director
I
should
think
be.
it's
I
more.
could
It's
only
more like it's like more if the alumni could vote to get new UT president or even the new CEO of new president of the Tennessee Titans, and then the Tennessee Titans president can decide who the coach is. And to Bruno's point, real fans don't get to vote because to get into this membership is not easy because it's like being a member of a country club. It's not everybody can get in. Like you
right.
have to have a process. Like you have to be accepted. Some teams are easier than others, but you have to have a process. And first, it's not like, oh, I if I join, like say, like compare my hometown team, Rio Bronco. If I wanna to become a create a membership of Rio Bronco tomorrow, I'm not gonna be able to vote in this council election. If to wait a year, then after a year been paying monthly payments and being a member for a year, then I'm be allowed to vote in this council election. Then maybe in 2 or 3 years I can run as a council of Rio Bronco. Then I can maybe run as a Rio Bronco president. And that happens to all the teams basically in Brazil. There's even some exceptions are like the Red Bull Bragantino team who has a CEO and even teams who have been bought in recent years, but it's still a really really small number of teams. The majority is run as the like a country club kind of style because they were created as country clubs in the 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I could see how that would cause a ton of problems because if you had that type of system here in America, I mean, it would bleed over into actual politics. Is what would happen, like especially in the South with the SEC football, like because you had someone like in Alabama, let's say someone gets in there and is able to somehow become president, and for some unforeseen reason they don't like Nick Saban and they decide to get rid of him, even though he's been an incredible coach. I mean, could you imagine the backlash that would happen? I mean, have there been any situations like that where you have a coach that's well loved, he wins a ton of games, but someone gets elected who doesn't like him and he gets fired?
That's a great question. I have to maybe look into cases in the past. That's a great example because it can, like for example, right now, like another team nearby here, Ponte Preta. Ponte Preta has a beloved coach, Gilson Kleina, who managed to avoid relegation with the team, but he doesn't know if he's going to stay or not because Ponte Preta is going to have a new president, selected by the end of by the middle of December, and it's going to be a new president because they elected a whole different council. So a coach doesn't know if he's going to stay or not because it's totally different leadership. It can change. Like of course, sometimes like Corinthians, for example, the same kind of group kind of been in the command of Corinthians in like taking leadership roles for the past 14 years. So there hasn't been much change, but that can happen. Like if you change a different direction, a different group kind of take control of the team, they can fire the coach because they can see the previous coach like, hey, he was hired by the previous administration. It's literally like politics, like one administration to the other.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like an extremely chaotic way. I don't even know how you would be able to transition out of that to a more stable form of ownership, because it just seems like there's already too many people who are way too involved. And I'm kind of glad we don't have that in America because
Oh yeah,
I don't want to have a million hands in the pie. You
yeah.
got
That's the problem with happening in Brazil. It's a million hands in the pie because, and a lot of those teams, like imagine you being one of the councils of these big teams, like you ended up being a big dog. You ended up being kind of like asked to the media to speak. You ended up having some sort of a important position, and then you ended up having use this position even to advance your political agenda. Like you ended up being recognized to the fans. Hey, this guy was good to my team. I'm gonna end up voting for them in the election. So a lot of people use this political power in sports to go into politics.
Yeah, I can imagine because you're getting at people's first love because people love sports first before they ever even start considering politics. So you can get them. You can say, "Oh, I did all this stuff for your sports club. Now it's time to do stuff for the rest of your life."
Yeah, and
I
it's so funny. I thought in America there would be even more cases. Like in Brazil, there has been so many former athletes that has run for many offices, like like state congressman, congressman, for governor, for senator,
Yeah.
for you
I mean,
name it. I think
the big one next year is going to be Herschel Walker down in
yeah,
Georgia.
Herschel Walker.
Nine, yeah, 1980 Heisman winner. He's going to be running against, I believe it's Raphael Warnock, because Ossoff has a seat to 2026, but Warnock has to defend his seat next year. So that's going to be a very interesting race.
And like I compared the Herschel Walker situation to Oscar Schmidt. I don't know if you know him, a big time basketball player. He was the big star when Brazil defeated the U.S. in the Pan American Games in Indianapolis in the 80s. He ran for senator in 1998 as in a conservative party. He ended up not winning it, but he ran as a senator, and he never won with politics before. So I kind of compare this situation with Oscar that I think is going to happen to Herschel Walker. I think Herschel Walker take even some lessons to what happened because Oscar was still beloved. He was this like adored basketball player. He was one of the biggest basketball players in Brazil. Even though basketball is not the first sport, people still remember him of all the trophies that he got.
I will say that I think with Donald Trump's election back in 2016, that's definitely opened up the door for more celebrities, whether they be entertainers, former just real estate moguls or whatever, or athletes. I think there's definitely that room now because I don't know how many athletes I can think of the top of my head that I would think would make a good president. I mean, I don't know if there's that many because it takes a certain skill set to be a really good president, and they don't often overlap with athletes. But
Or even coaches, like for example, let me double check, but I think he ran volleyball coach Bernardinho. He won Olympics. He won world titles. He was such a known as like this tough leader on the court, this kind of like aggressive leader, and he ended up I think running in 2018 for governor of Rio. I don't think he won, but people still voted for him because he saw him as a leader, as this kind of guy who can take charge.
yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the one sport in American sports I can think of that would be really good potentially at being like a governor or president or something like that would be a former head coach, a former college football head coach, because there's a lot that you have to maintain as a football head coach because you have to obviously maintain the morale of your team. You have to maintain the morale of all your assistant coaches and all your GAs. You have to maintain the morale of the media. You have to maintain the morale of a crazy fan base, of alumni, of boosters. There is so much you have to juggle as a college football head coach that if you're able to successfully do it and able to keep all these different parties engaged, then those skills can translate over to being a good president or a good governor in terms of just being able to satisfy multiple groups at the same time. Because if you're going to be one of those leaders, then you have to be able to listen to all kinds of problems and process them very quickly. Gus, are you there? Okay, I think we've lost Gus momentarily down there in Americana, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Hopefully, we'll be able to get him back here in just a moment. Yeah, I think we were beginning to wind down that conversation anyway, so we'll head back to it whenever he's able to get back online. But I'll just kind of switch it up here and head over to some of my American topics I wanted to discuss. Okay, so he's had to leave. Hopefully, he'll be able to get back in here in a moment. But I want to talk about Dan Mullen getting fired this week. Because Dan Mullen, he's been the coach down there at Florida since 2017. He got to 3 straight New Year's Six bowls, won the SEC East last year, almost beat Alabama in the SEC title game. But the wheels came off. They've lost their last 9 out of 11 games against Power 5 teams. And now they have now they've decided to fire Dan Mullen, who seemed like a great hire for a long time. But I think a lot of the problems here started off the field. Gus, are you back?
I'm back. I had some internet issues.
Yeah, I kind of went ahead and ended the culture segment. Was there anything else you want to say on the culture stuff? Because I've moved on to Dan Mullen talk.
I mean, just to end it up, I think that's why I was so privileged to cover sports in America and Brazil because I saw two different cultures, two different ways to cheer. There's no wrong way. Of course, I always going to be understanding more Brazilian side than American side. And I was even talking to a journalist that like I was able to cover the Vols differently than you because I was able to see more like kind of like the distance because the Vols were this new team that I ended up getting to know when I was a grown up. You had a connection as a child, as like someone that has grown up watching the Vols, and that for me is Rio Branco. Rio Branco is my childhood team. That's the thing. The biggest thing is like when you create a connection with the sports as a child, it changed your whole culture. I think we, as a sports fan, and no, don't matter if it's in America or in Brazil. That's my, to close my argument, and that's why I love sports. That's why I work in sports journalism.
Yeah, and I imagine if I moved down to Brazil, I'd be able to begin to connect with some of your teams and the teams that are located down in Sao Paulo, even though I'm not native to that Brazilian soccer culture. Because sports in any case are always able to be appreciated. You can hear my
Oh
dog behind me; she's going kind of
no,
crazy.
it's okay.
Yeah,
Shout out. What's your name of the dog? Shout
that's
out
Emmy.
to.
Hold on, let me see if I can get her. Emmy, come over here. Let's see.
Oh, we have a
Surprise. Yes.
special listener.
Yeah. Hold
And
on.
even it's and then to the point, you bring dogs, even the pets. I like how in America even pets are have like sports gear and stuff. That's part of a culture when you embrace your pet in your team. I think in Brazil there still hasn't developed that connection. I think in one day it will. I think that's my and
Yeah.
Wild Nick.
There we go. There is
Oh,
Emmy. Yeah.
oh, hello, cute. Oh my God!
Yeah.
For people watching on Facebook, seeing the Nick's dog, he's so cute.
Yeah. So she's like 6 years old. She's a Dachshund, as you can tell, a wiener dog.
Oh,
Yeah. The rest of the family's out here doing the Christmas decorations. She's going kind of nuts at the moment. So
my
we'll see
mom
if
is
she
also
just.
doing. My mom is also doing the Christmas decoration, but here in Brazil it's so weird because this Christmas is on summer. People don't get into involved after I say like maybe mid December, maybe after like December 10 or December 12.
Yeah. I mean, definitely here it's. And people even start before Thanksgiving. Like Christmas movies are already on television. Like I saw Christmas Vacation was on last night. I know ABC Family. Well, actually, it's Freeform now, but it's always going to be ABC Family to me. They're already showing Christmas movies. It's just it's pretty crazy to me. Of course, one of the best things, honestly, about Thanksgiving week to me, obviously, is some of the sporting events. Obviously, you got a lot of football games that are on, and college basketball. I mean, this is something that's really taken off here over the past couple of years. It's the idea of holiday hoops. You have all kinds of tournaments. Of course, the Vols were in a tournament this weekend up in Connecticut. I know the Lady Vols are going to play in a tournament in Las Vegas this weekend. And the Vols, they got beat badly by Villanova, but they beat down North Carolina 89-72. And what was just a really, really a kind of a somewhat like a surprising result because, Kenny Chandler, he had a really, really good game. He's our 5-star point guard. He's probably going to be a top 10 pick next year in the NBA draft. But the real star was Sakai Ziegler. I believe he's only like 5'5", or something like a really, really short point guard. But he had 18 points. He is very fast. He can shoot the ball really well. And I was just really, really impressed with his performance against North Carolina. And I'm really excited to see what they do the rest of the season because, obviously the game on Saturday against Villanova was disappointing. But to be able to come back the next day and blow out a really talented North Carolina team is really, really impressive to me.
Yeah, yeah, and even some fans were criticizing the Vols after they lost to they lost. I believe it was not Villanova, was another big powerhouse in college basketball. But I mean, the Vols are developing. I think it's a transition year. They lost two big players for the draft, but I think they
Yeah.
can be a viable team. But I want to get to the Dan Mullen story because I still can't believe how Florida season started and how it's ending.
I know, right? Because the first month they looked really good. I mean, they came close to being Alabama. They blew out Tennessee. And you think, okay, Tennessee, Florida's going to be all right this year. Florida, and they're not going to be great. They're not going to be Georgia, but they're going to finish like 8-4, 9-3, and be in a position to bounce back next year in championship contention. But that's not what happened at all. I mean, getting blown up by South Carolina, losing to Missouri. I mean, I remember Tennessee beat Missouri 62-24, and Florida could only manage 23 points in overtime with an overtime period. So 16 points of regulation against the same defense that was just awful all season. But as I was kind of mentioning going into before you came back on, the main reason I think Dan Mullen's not the coach anymore, not necessarily because of his on the field performance, because I think having a bad year, you can survive that. Because I think if we've gotten to the point in college football where having one bad year gets you fired, then I think it's gone a bit too far in that direction. I think coaches should have a grace period because in college football, you can't keep the players forever. You're always going to have turnover, and sometimes you're just not going to have a great team. Nick
Transfer
Saban
portal, like
yeah, even with the transfer portal though, like it's all because you have to build chemistry. And if you're turning over the roster every single year, it's really hard to create the chemistry you need to be successful. But I think with Dan Mullen, it was the off the field stuff. It was dressing up like Darth Vader after you basically provoked a fight against Missouri last year. It was talking about how, for example, last year when they went to Texas A&M and lost, they said that they lost to Texas A&M because Texas A&M had 30,000 fans in the stand. And, at Florida, we weren't able to have that many fans in the stand because of COVID regulations. I'm just like, you didn't lose because there were 30,000 fans in the stands. If anything, that should have been a benefit to you because you weren't having to play in front of 105,000 people like you would in a normal year at Kyle Field. Then he comes on after the Cotton Bowl, after they lost to Oklahoma 55-20, and said the real Florida team played its last game 11 days ago in the SEC title game. And the reason why he said that was there was a lot of players who didn't play because they were saving themselves for the NFL draft. And that's just ridiculous. That was disrespectful to the players who played that game. And, I understand it's not the playoffs. And this is one of the really terrible things about what's happened to college football. But people have just completely devalued bowl games, which used to be the culmination, a celebration of what your team did in the season. And I just thought that was just disrespectful to the game itself, what he did there. Then he comes back this year. He starts talking about how amazing their 2-point loss was to Alabama. And, he does the whole quarterback carousel between Anthony Richardson and Emory Jones. And neither one's really that good. And then starts talking about how he doesn't recruit during the season, how he doesn't think about recruiting during the season. And if you look at the recruiting classes, they hadn't been that good, especially for Florida. Like, if you're Florida, you're the only SEC school in that whole state, which is one of the most talent-laden states in the entire country. Florida should always be top 5 without exception. Like, there's no excuse ever for Florida to not be a top 5 recruiting class. Those are the stuff that got Dan Mullen fired because he was eventually leading them down the drain. I do think as a coach, he is a really good X's and O's coach. I think he will land somewhere where they don't recruit that well. And I think he'll flourish. Like Mississippi State was the perfect job for Dan Mullen because the expectations were never going to be high there. And if you get him a generational player, they'll be very, very competitive. But I just don't think he'll be a championship level coach. Like, I think he would have been a fine coach for Tennessee, for example, if he had gotten hired back in 2017, because he definitely would have improved us from the Butch Jones era. But I don't think but I'm hoping that Josh Heupel ends up being a far better recruiter than Dan Mullen was. And I'll say this, in terms of handling the media, Heupel is a million times better than Dan Mullen. Like, Josh Heupel, for example, doesn't say anything stupid to the media. He says all the right things. He backs the fan base. He gets the fan base hyped. And I think and Dan Mullen just wasn't. The excitement was down because Florida is an excitement job. Because in the state of Florida, there's so many things you can do. You can go to the beach. You can go to Disney World. You can go do whatever instead of watching Florida football versus like being in Tennessee where, yeah, you got the Smokies and stuff, but Tennessee football is going to be your main draw. And then Florida's always been about the excitement because you have to remember, before Steve Spurrier in 1990, Florida football was nothing. They haven't won conference championships outside of Spurrier and Meyer. Just remember that. The Florida football program before 1990 was basically South Carolina. was basically their most direct, comparison, and they've just managed to be an elite program for the last 30 years. And I think they need to remember that with this hire, because there's a good chance that who you're going to hire is not going to make you into an Alabama or a Georgia. Instead, you're going to be like South Carolina and be down here in the middle with the rest of his teams, and hopefully the Vols will be able to get some wins on them
Let,
over the next
let
couple of
me
years.
ask you two questions on that. First, do you think if Tennessee played Florida in the same date they played last year, I believe it was December 5th, the score would have been different than when they played in September? And second, if Obermeyer gets fired in Jacksonville, maybe next year, who do you think he will come back to coach Florida?
So first and the second question, no. Urban Meyer left Florida. A lot of Florida fans have a bad taste in their mouths from that whole situation. I know he won them 2 titles, but ultimately, he just the culture under him ended up being really bad. They had a lot of unsavory people on the teams there. Just think about Aaron Hernandez, for example. It just not Urban Meyer is not a trustworthy person to run a program. He's a great X's and O's coach. He's a great recruiter, but he always leaves programs in a mess when he leaves.
I think Ohio State was the exception because Ryan Day has been a good coach,
Right. But at the same time, though, he's not. You're not going to have him for more than 5 years, so I wouldn't do it. And back to the first question, I think the Vols would win right now. The Vol, obviously, Hendon Hooker is fully ingrained within the offense now. He wasn't back in week 3. Clearly the Florida team has just lost a lot of confidence. They were playing really well to begin the season, but they just aren't anymore. And I think I honestly could see it being 38-14 the other way around now if Tennessee played Florida. Of course, our defense struggles a lot just because of depth and the amount of plays they have to play. So if I had to pick a score right now, I would have to say I would think like Tennessee 41, Florida 24 would be what I'd pick right now. Because a lot of people say, it's no embarrassing that Tennessee lost to Florida, but I don't say so because just at the time, Tennessee wasn't completely there yet versus what Florida was at the time. Florida almost beat Alabama. And if Florida and Alabama played again, Alabama would murder them this time around.
Like, it's so crazy. Like, if you go back to the date that Tennessee Florida played, if you ask who's going to be bowl eligible first, everybody would say Florida. And now Tennessee is bowl eligible, Florida is not.
And I'll tell you this, Florida isn't going to be bowl eligible because Florida State will beat them to become bowl eligible themselves. I'm saying that right now. Florida State will win. Because I think Florida's just giving up on the season. I mean, I don't understand why would you want to play for a bowl game this week? You don't have a head coach anymore. I just don't see what the motivation is there. While Florida State, they had a horrible start to the season, but they've really kind of begun to turn around. They're playing way better. They beat Miami, and now they have a chance to beat Florida too. Like Florida State, despite losing to an FCS school to begin this season, Jacksonville State, they have that heartburn against Notre Dame. I believe they started 0-4, if I remember correctly. Being able to get to 6-6, I think that would be a massive success for Mike Norvell, and to be able to help Florida State start getting back to a good point again.
Yeah, they started the season by going to overtime with number 5 in the country, Notre Dame, and then the week after they lost to Jacksonville State. But after they started 0-4, but then they won 3 straight. I know it was UNC, which was ranked in the top 10 in the country when the season started, and they were able to beat Florida, Miami. And if they beat Florida, they kind of run down, beat the two largest
state. Yeah. They run the Sunshine State. So that would be a huge accomplishment, I think, for Florida State if they were able to win it this year. So definitely, just in terms of a broader. So in terms of who is going to replace Dan Mullen, there's a lot of rumors going around that Billy Napier, coach at Louisiana Lafayette, could be the guy, but that's obviously not at least it's not confirmed at this time. Obviously I remember LSU is also looking for a coach. A lot of stuff is pointing towards maybe Dave Aranda, current coach at Baylor, who used to be LSU's defensive coordinator.
Lane Kiffin maybe coming back to the Sunshine State.
That's a potential.
He was successful at Florida Atlantic University. So he
Yeah.
will definitely won't have any position to work
I would
in the
love to
floor.
pose this. If you thought Tennessee Ole Miss was bad, imagine Florida coming back to Neyland Stadium with Lane Kiffin as head coach.
Wow.
Imagine what that would look like. Because already Tennessee fans hate Lane Kiffin enough. Now pair him with Florida. Like that would be just an unbelievable scene. I mean, they would have to probably bring in the military for that game.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There would be. It's like when Corinthians got this Santos coach, and then when Corinthians played against Santos, I think in the late '90s, fans threw coins after coins after coins, called Judah, calling traitor, throw everything. Like
It's gonna be like that.
the police had to like literally do the cascade. What is the name of it? They protect the thing, like they use the barricades.
I mean, you're gonna have to be frisked to go into that game. Like they're gonna make sure you have nothing on you outside of maybe your phone, because I know because phones are way too expensive.
There'll be people throwing phones. There'll be people throwing phones.
Yeah,
There'll be
they
people
can start recording your Snapchat. Boom! I'm throwing the phone at Lane Kiffin, but I'm not actually doing that for legal reasons. But yeah, but and also I think one other wild card potentially to watch for some reports maybe that Brian Harsin, coach at Auburn, is maybe considering going back to Washington because the Washington Huskies back in the Pac-12. He is a Northwestern guy. He was at Boise State. Auburn has kind of fallen apart here recently. They lost to South Carolina this weekend. I was just like, what are you doing, Auburn? Of course, they didn't look good last week at Texas A&M. They're probably going to get blown out by Alabama this weekend in the Iron Bowl to finish 6-6. I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Harsin went to Washington and left Auburn, because I just don't think that's a good situation for him. And I think it'd be kind of a chance to reset for Auburn, who I think made a big mistake in firing Gus Malzahn. Because a lot of Auburn fans will say, oh, Gus Malzahn wasn't consistent. He couldn't win a championship. And that might be true. But he's also the only coach who beat Nick Saban more than once in the last decade. Yeah, well, outside Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney beat him twice. But Gus Malzahn beat him 3 times in the last decade. I mean, no other coach has done that. And I understand Auburn wants to be Alabama so bad, but I don't think there's any coach you could hire that's going to make you Alabama. You're Auburn, and I think Auburn has a place to be successful. Maybe not Alabama successful, but I just think in terms, and really I think this is something that SEC fan bases eventually have to stop and realize. And I think this is starting to happen in the Tennessee fan base, where it's like, okay, we're going through coach after coach after coach, and nothing's working. But people have forgotten that stability is key. Like, yeah, I know Alabama was able to go 12-0 in the second year under Nick Saban, but most programs can't do that. That's just unrealistic.
And Nick Saban lost to Louisiana Monroe in his first year. He lost to Louisiana Monroe.
He did, yeah. And people, forget stuff like that. And I know like Kirby Smart went to the national title game in his second year, but that type of hire is very rare. I think above everything else, you need stability to be consistently good. And if you are consistently good, then 1 year you can put it all together to be great. So, and that's why, I'm somewhat concerned about some of the expectations around Heupel, for example, because people next year are now talking about maybe winning 9, 10 games. And like, okay, I like the talent that's going to come back next year, but let's not forget where we just were as a program. And just let's appreciate for now where we've been, because having the year that we've had at Tennessee is so much better than I think anyone predicted. And I don't want people to just have their expectations go so high that it ultimately screws over the coaching staff, where they've been able to really install stability, because stability is the key. I mean, ask Texas fans right now if they should have kept Tom Herman. Because I never got that firing. Because, they were in the top 25 last year. He had won the Sugar Bowl. But they were like, oh, he's not good enough for us. Well, okay, now have a 6-game winning streak under Steve Sarkisian, who sucked at Washington and sucked at USC. So it just, the trading out those coaches made no sense for Texas. And now they're reaping what they sowed by losing to teams like Kansas. So, and that probably should have just been a hot take in itself, but that's just my overall thoughts. And I've come to kind of realize this year is college football fans overall it's so unrealistic because all of us have so much envy of Alabama and Georgia to an extent, and like Ohio State and Oklahoma. And we're also tired of the same teams winning over and over again that we're desperately searching for a solution. Perhaps the solution, but perhaps the only solution is you kind of have to take like a farmer mentality of, okay, we got to plant something and let it grow. Because you can't just make a championship happen out of nowhere.
I agree. And if one thing SEC football should learn with Brazilian soccer is that changing coach after coach after coach is not going to solve anything. Because in Brazil, if there's one thing that I know for sure is that teams are going to run into coaches. Like, look at Grêmio. Grêmio, one of the most successful team in the decade, fired their coach that has been successful in the last 5 years, and now they run into 5 different coaches in one season, counting Renato Gaúcho, the successful coach. Then Thiago Nunes, Felipão, interim head coach, now Wagner Mancini. So they run into 5 coaches in one season, and they're in the relegation zone. So that tells everything that changing coaches don't solve the problems.
Oh yeah, for sure. Having 5 coaches in 1 year, I mean, that just sounds terrible. I mean, I think in professional leagues, there's a little bit more leeway just because, they're professionals and they can handle it. But when you're dealing with college players and dealing with just everything that goes into running a college program, I think that it is very important to have stability.
But even let's compare to the Major League Baseball, because the Major League Baseball play 162 games into regular season plus playoffs. So it's a league that has a lot of games. Like, Brazil has now some teams play 80 to 90 games. Imagine having 5 coaches in one season.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be basically impossible in college football because there's only 12 games. But yeah, but for so 90 divided by 5 is 18. So you'd be changing a coach every 16 to 18 games.
Yeah.
Throughout the season, which is just unbelievable. Like, that's barely enough time to get used to a new system before having to learn a completely new one.
Yeah, imagine Major League Baseball every 32 games you switch coaches.
Yeah, I mean, in a college, that's switching a coach every other game.
Yeah, I don't think in college football it will happen like that because it's the head coach, it's the president of the football operation. So I think it may be fired by the end of the season or maybe 2 seasons. But in Brazil, coach is just the team's not playing well. Let's cut him because it's easier than firing 20 players.
Right. Yeah, but certainly it's going to be interesting to see what those coaches do, what those programs do in terms of hiring the new coaches. It'll be interesting if the Auburn situation becomes an opening of its own. And I think a lot of this will be determined by just what happens this weekend with college football rivalries. I may go to Tennessee Vanderbilt, may not. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously, I'm hoping for a big in-state win for Tennessee this week. I think a very good shot of doing it. We're 31-point favorites over Vanderbilt, which is insane to think about. But yeah.
And also,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, basically, just to finish my point. Obviously, some of the bigger games this week include like Michigan, Ohio State. Potentially, that could be like a playoff, essentially a pseudo playoff game, amongst others. And of course, basically every in-state rivalry game is happening this weekend, like South Carolina, Clemson, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, Washington, Washington State, Oregon versus Oregon State, and other games like that.
I mean, I love rivalry games. I mean, I've been to 2 big rivalry games this week in Brazil, like Palmeiras, São Paulo, Corinthians, and Santos. And it's a different whole atmosphere. The fans go different to the game. Like, it's so crazy. Palmeiras is literally not caring about the Brazilian championship, but they fill up the stadium because there was a chance if they beat their rival was going to go to the relegation zone. And all the fans of Palmeiras left the stadium angry after they lost because they were like, boy, we missed the chance of beating our rival and make them go to the relegation zone. That was the whole sentiment. So having a rival is really and I bet, like, for example, Florida and Florida State, like Florida State fans cannot wait to beat Florida and make them not be bowl eligible.
Oh yeah, and that and vice versa, right? Because if Florida State loses, they don't get to go to a bowl game. So there's so much on the line in that one particular game. Just kind of briefly over on the NFL. Honestly, this week was kind of not that interesting. I mean, outside of just upsets like my Titans losing to the Texans, just a stupid loss for Tennessee. Probably the Steelers Chargers game was probably the only really great game of the weekend. That was a crazy where the Chargers were up 27-10, but the Steelers came back. They took a lead, but the Chargers ultimately won it. Justin Herbert and Austin Eckler absolutely lit it up. Jonathan Taylor lit it up for Indianapolis against Buffalo, and what was an upset. I have no idea who's going to the Super Bowl right now. The Packers lost to the Vikings. I just have no idea. There's no great teams this year. There's a lot of good teams that are prone to play really bad certain weeks. So the playoffs this year are completely unpredictable. I have no idea who's even going to be the number one seeds right now. Probably one of the most wide open NFL fields I can ever remember. There's probably at least 8 to 10 teams that could win the Super Bowl this year. So it's going to be great to see who ultimately comes out on top over there. The last American topic I want to bring up before I throw it over to Brazilian topics, there's a potential diplomatic boycott coming of the Beijing Winter Olympics. This was announced the other day. So President Biden said on Thursday that the United States is considering a diplomatic boycott of the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing. And this is in response to some of the growing human rights abuses. And, obviously, over the past few days, one of the biggest sports stories internationally is the disappearance of Ping Shei. I believe that's her name, the Chinese tennis star that has gone missing after she criticized the Chinese government. Of course, a lot of people think that China had something to do with that. And, obviously, that's probably going to get this show banned in China. I don't care. You can ban us all you want, Xi Jinping. But, this has been something that's been talked about more and more, the idea of boycotting these games. Of course, this is not unprecedented. Back in 1980, the United States boycotted the 1980 Summer Olympics in Moscow. Of course, during the Cold War, the Soviet Union returned in kind in 1984 by not coming to Los Angeles. I think they should do this. Now, let me clarify this. And this is from the New York Times. You can look up the article. It wouldn't be a boycott in terms of athletes. Athletes would still be able to go to the Olympics, just that you would have no government officials. So it's more
It's
of
like
a
what happened to
symbolic
Russia. It's like what happened to Russia in the 2020 Olympics. They play under the American Olympic Institute or the American Olympic.
Yeah, but my question is, if I'm an American in that situation, why would I want to go to China? Because the Chinese government's going to be furious with the United States if they do this. I would not go to China in this situation, at all, because I'd be scared that they're going to do something to me to prove a point, right? Because if they're doing something to this tennis star, which a lot of people are seemingly thinking that that's the situation. Of course, we can't prove it one way or the other exactly what's happened, but it seems pretty coincidental that she would criticize the Chinese government and then she all of a sudden disappears. This is what happens in Russia all the time. We might get banned there too for saying that. The two countries to America is all sports. We're not all countries because we're going to get banned in some places. But
I look it up. Brazil has not declared anything about the Winter Olympics. I mean, Brazil does not have a big powerhouse since we are not a winter country. But I think there's not anything public about that.
Yeah. Well, what do you think Bolsonaro would do in that situation? Would Bolsonaro want to boycott? Or
I think he will kind of think about boycotting because he's not a big fan of China. I mean, he criticized the Chinese vaccine for COVID. He has, come out and say some things derogatory about the Chinese government, even though when the Chinese, diplomatics kind of pressure him, he apologized. But I don't think he want to get involved in this term right now. And if Bolsonaro boycotts the Winter Olympics, then Brazilian, media will be like, Brazil should join the Olympics. It's just funny, just kind of like.
And then also
I don't think he's gonna get involved.
And also, there's the potential too. If the United States decides not to go, then you can see the United Kingdom not go, France not go, Canada, all these other countries that align with the United States. Of course, Brazil is one of those countries. A country like India would be another country that you would see because it would probably boycott these Olympics. Because I would imagine India is probably going to do it anyway. Because India and China have had bomber skirmishes in the Himalayas. So, I don't know. China has really made a lot of countries mad for a lot of different reasons. And I think That's going to be shown this winter. I personally am conflicted on whether or not I want to even watch the Winter Olympics. I love the Winter Olympics, but I don't really want to support China. Like that government, and I understand the United States government's not perfect. I mean, no government in the world is perfect, but China's government,
Bring,
like some of the stuff they're doing is
bring,
not.
bring, bring your Winter Olympics to Brazil. Deal.
Yeah, we're gonna do ice skating on the beaches of
From
or
Copacabana. Yeah,
Copacabana. That's
let's
how you
do
say it. Impanina. We can have the girl from Impanina playing while
Ipanema. Yeah,
that'd be a
let's
great.
do Rio hosting the Winter Olympic.
That would be a great like skating routine though. Like the girl from Impanina. Like someone could skate to that. Yeah, someone could skate to that. Yeah. Because I remember because I was introduced to that song because of the Summer Olympics because of like Giselle Buchanan coming out to it. Tom Brady's wife. Um, that was
It's so
really
funny that Tom Brady is Giselle Bündchen's husband here. He has a nickname, Giselo, because
really.
here Tom Brady is Giselle Bündchen's husband. Because
Mhm.
Giselle is the biggest model, so Tom Brady is known for being. Of course, NFL Brazilian fans make fun of it. It's like, we know who Tom Brady is. We know him as a football player, not because who he's married to. But it's just funny that
That's hilarious to me. Like that, Tom Brady is that's who she's married to, but here it's
yeah,
so that's who he's married to.
yeah, it's kind of, and the nickname Giselo. That's the funniest nickname. Like, it's like, oh, Tom Brady is the Giselle Bündchen's husband, so Giselo. Oh, he's not as big deal as she is. So, but it's just like playing kind of like who's famous, who, like where, like
Yeah, I just wonder what the potential is. Let's say all these Western nations, including Brazil, America, Canada, Germany, places like that, decide we're not going to go to China. I wonder what the chances are that they hold their own separate, like Winter Olympics, basically, like the Western Olympics. And then China only has like the countries in their sphere of influence. In their sphere of influence. Like
I mean, I don't know if Brazil's gonna get involved because Brazil don't, they don't. I don't see Winter Olympic as big deal. I think there's of course some athletes who participate, but I don't know who. But I think it's gonna be interesting to see what they're gonna do in terms of this diplomatic situation, and we're definitely gonna talk more on our podcast. So let's go quickly into the Brazilian topics because this week was also very slow. Was the weekend another a week of Brazilian championship? But big question is for Saturday, who's the favorite? Because now Flamengo, who a month ago was in crisis, has won 4 games in a row, and Palmeiras, who a month ago was invincible, won won I think 6 games straight. Now they lost 3 consecutive games, and so now the favorite is Flamengo again. But a month ago was Palmeiras, 2 months ago was Flamengo. So nobody knows who's the favorite for the Libertadores finals this Saturday. But whoever loses is going to be in hell, and whoever wins is going to be in paradise. Because whoever loses is going to be in crisis, very bad, and whoever's going to win is going to be on the top of the world. So it's going to be one of the biggest games the last few years. Two rich teams. It's like Steelers and Cowboys. It's like really big game is going to be this Saturday. Everybody's talking about it. Like Palmeiras is playing tonight, Atlético Mineiro with all reserves, and Flamengo playing Grêmio all reserves because they only care about this Libertadores final on Saturday. That's all they think about. And just finish up Brazilian topics. Botafogo, which was one of the most iconic teams from Rio, is back in the first division. Also won the second division tournament. So I will be there Sunday covering their trophy game in Rio. So congratulations to them. Hopefully they'll stay in the first division again. Botafogo was a big deal in the 60s. They had Garrincha, which is one of the biggest soccer players ever. Fortunately, he wasn't big as Pelé because he drank a lot. But, Botafogo still has a lot of charm, a lot of mystic, and, has a lot of older fans because they were so good in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take for you to get from where you are down to Rio for that game?
I would say 8 hours. I'm gonna take a bus on Friday night, and I'll be there on Saturday. Gonna
Hmm.
watch the Libertadores final in a bar, with a lot of Flamengo fans. The guy who's coming with me, my commentator, he's a Palmeiras fan. He's gonna be kind of like amongst the rival team a lot of, because and I'm so curious to see on Saturday how the city of Rio is going to be for this game. I
Yeah,
imagine it's going to be a whole bunch of people wearing
because
Flamingo jerseys, Flamingo flags. It's going to be crazy.
it reminds me a ton of being in London for the championship final, and we went out to a pub to go watch that final between Liverpool and
And
Tottenham.
Tottenham,
And
yeah,
but even
yeah,
though we were in
like,
London,
yeah, that's a good
there are more
comparison.
Liverpool fans where we were, even though we were in London, which kind of blew my mind. Just how
I
many
think
Liverpool
Liverpool is
fans there were.
because Dallas Cowboys, like they have so much national fan base, but it's kind of like being Liverpool for Liverpool Tottenham final, because Rio is the city of Flamingo, so there's going to be a lot of Flamingo fans, all over the city on
Yeah,
Saturday. I'm excited to see.
yeah, that's gonna be pretty amazing to see. I'll be very interested to see who is gonna win that game. I'll have to see if I can find a stream of it up here in America. But it's now time for hot takes. Hot take time. Um, and your hot take actually has to do with the Libertadores. So I'm gonna let you just go right into that.
Yeah, I mean, my hot take is like, as much as I see Ball try to make an international Libertadores final, have one game, kind of having one hosting nation, one hosting city, kind of like the Super Bowl. But in South America, it's hard because it's not like you can take like a quick flight from Sao Paulo, Rio to Montevideo, where the final is going to be. Ticket prices, like airplane prices, are through the roof. There's no buses. You cannot even rent a car to go to Montevideo, because rental car companies, I don't think even can. I don't know. There's some legal problems with that, but still, the ticket prices are crazy. I think they're like $500 to $1,000 the bare prices. So it's sad to see, because then also, in fans in Brazil, they waited the whole year to this game. Now they're gonna have to watch by TV, and you know, I disagree. For example, Champions League final in Europe makes sense. You can take a train real quick to wherever destination. In South America, there's no train system who connects the countries. So if it excludes a lot of fans and bring a lot of elitism. I At first I was in favor, but now I was heavily against. It should be a two games kind of, home and home, like, Flamengo plays in the home, then Palmeiras playing his home in the final. I don't think, but unfortunately, right now, Ball is moving to more direction of, let's make this kind of elite, kind of make prices up. Let's make this into a show like the Super Bowl. But the Super Bowl has been a tradition like that for decades, and you know, and it's easy in America or in Europe to move around. In South America, it's not.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they haven't developed the infrastructure. I know Uruguay, they border Brazil, and I understand like between Uruguay and Argentina, there's that massive gulf in between like Buenos Aires and Montevideo that poses a big challenge. But for like Brazil to Uruguay and Paraguay and places like that, I'm kind of surprised they wouldn't have a kind of international like a continental train system. Because I understand you have
Yeah,
the Andes in the far west that creates a big problem with getting to Chile and those areas, but at least on the East Coast. And I know that you have the Amazon, but that's all the way up in the north side of
yeah,
Brazil. So
yeah,
yeah,
and also, like, for example, it was so unlucky that last year the hosting city for the Libertadores final was Rio, but back then only 8,000 fans went to that game because it was still COVID restriction. This time, if it wasn't Rio, 100% of the fans could have gone and would have been a crazy game. But unfortunately, now it's in Montevideo, which is, whatever Comebol chooses. So it's understandably, but still, it's going to be a great game. Excited to watch. And I thought at first I was going to broadcast, but then my partner is going to be in Rio with me. Let's just watch it, enjoy the game, enjoy the opportunity. Let's focus on tomorrow's broadcast. And, I'm just excited to watch, because I'm not even I'm rooting for a great game, because I'm not even a fan of those teams.
absolutely. I certainly hope it's a great game because I know my hot take is going to be about a game that's not going to be so good. Of course, with it being Thanksgiving on Thursday in the United States, that only means one thing: we get to watch the Detroit Lions play. Look, I understand the Detroit Lions created the Thanksgiving tradition in 1934. They're the forerunners of the whole Thanksgiving NFL game, but it's time to change it. Like, the Detroit Lions have not won a playoff game in almost 30 years. 1991. They're 0-8 and 1 this year. They were the first team to ever go 0-16. Most years, they're not competitive. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really want to watch Jared Goff play. I don't want to watch the Detroit Lions play. And they have to play the Chicago Bears, who are another team I don't really like watch playing. These are two very bad teams who now get to the entire national spotlight at 12:30 p.m. Eastern in front of everyone. And then we got to pair it with Joe Buck and Taylor Aikman, who I know those poor folks are going to be bored out of their minds trying to call this game and trying to make it exciting. At least the other games are interesting, like the Raiders and Cowboys should be interesting. Bills Saints. We have the Egg Bowl Thursday night between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. The other games will be great. But I wish we'd be able to put a more interesting game besides the Lions. I think we need to pull them off of Thanksgiving until they prove they deserve that spot, because NFL fans deserve an entertaining game on one of the most important days of the year, which is Thanksgiving. But
I agree. I think, Thanksgiving is such a landmark of football that I don't think you should keep a team playing there just because they always play. I think I think Thanksgiving game should be a earned spot, not a tradition spot. A team should earn being there, not just like, oh, the Lions always play at Thanksgiving, so they always should play there. I think it should be something earned, like, like kind of like the opposite of the Hard Knocks. You did bad, you go to Hard Knocks. You did good, you should go to Thanksgiving game.
yeah,
I
that's like NBA Christmas. Like, no team has a guaranteed spot on there. You have to be good to be on NBA Christmas.
yeah.
Like LeBron has to
Oh,
play on NBA Christmas because he's the best player in the NBA, or has been at least for the last 15 years. And
and
I know
just to
we have a
finalize,
comment down there from
yeah,
Paulo.
the comment is, let me ask you, Nick. He asked, who's gonna win, Grêmio or Flamengo? He said he'll bet 1,000 reais on our he's gonna bet 1,000 reais on whatever we say is gonna win. So I ask you too, Nick, who's gonna win?
Oh, I'm
9:30
not the
p.m.
person to ask. I don't know. You're the one who knows those teams.
Uh, I will say
I
I think it's gonna be a tie. I think it's gonna be a tie. Flamengo is playing the reserves. Flamengo is not. Their mind is in Montevideo on Saturday. Their mind is not on tonight's game. Their mind is on Saturday. It's like
because
Palmeiras.
how much is 1,000 Rizals in American dollars?
I think with the let me see the currency today, but let me check 1 second. Is $179.
Okay, that's not that bad. I mean, yeah,
But
I
still,
mean,
a lot of money.
I know you talk positive a lot about Flamingo compared to Gremio. So I mean, that's just who I instinctively would go with. But if they're playing the reserves, then that sounds like just a game I wouldn't even touch.
Yeah, that's the tricky part because Grêmio is playing their life out. They need to win to, get closer to leave the relegation zone. And Flamengo is playing their reserve. They don't care about this game. Their mind is on Saturday. Their mind and heart and everything. It was so beautiful on, I think, Saturday. The team left to Porto Alegre. Friday, the team left to Porto Alegre because they're going to play 2 games there and then they're going to go to Montevideo. More than 5,000 fans show up carrying the bus, going along the bus from the Flamengo headquarters to the airport. They call this movement
awesome.
Aeroflá. They since they couldn't be at the stadium in the final, they said goodbye to their team. They said, good luck. We're with you. We're rooting for you. There are even people going on top of the bus trying to talk to the players because they want to show support for this big game on Saturday. And Palmeiras fans, they're definitely going to do that tomorrow when they leave to Montevideo as well.
Yeah, it's always great to see fans like accompany a team to the airport and stuff like that. But I know you've got games to cover tonight. And,
yeah. And just to let you know, the Libertadores final is going to be on Bean Sports on US. So unfortunately, It's not going to be hard.
I don't have that channel, so I'll have to find a stream of it. Somehow.
Yeah.
Legal or not legal?
There'll be probably a lot of YouTube. Just type Palmeiras Flamengo ao vivo, or live. You'll find it. There's, or maybe you just listen on the Brazilian radio because it's going to be a ton of it, tons of it on YouTube and Facebook. But that's for me and for Nick, right? And we'll be back next week.
Yep, we're planning on being back next Tuesday. We're going to try to do these at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m., 8:30 p.m. Brazilian time. Of course, we might have to flip it around depending on what we're doing, but that's what we're trying to aim for in terms of showtime. So definitely thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening on Spotify if you're listening to it that way. For Gus Tomazeli down in America's Sao Paulo, Brazil, I'm Nicholas Hill in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the United States. You've been listening to our podcast. Take care, and we'll see you next time for episode 7.